The 42nd session of the Senate, in the third regular session of the 16th Congress, is hereby called to order. May the chair ask everyone to rise and remain standing for a minute of silent prayer. Thank you very much. With the permission of the chamber, the chair declares a 1-minute suspension. Wala na. Pala rin. Okay. Let's go. Ilan na? Ha? Sa taas. Okay, sino? 12. Sige. Session is resumed. The Secretary will call the roll.
Roll call of members. The Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, Cayetano Alan, Peter Compañero S., Cayetano Pia S., Defensor Santiago, Ejercito, Enrile, Escudero, Estrada, Gingona, Honasan, Lapid, Legarda, Marcos, Usmeña, Pimentel, Po, Recto, Revilla, Soto, Trillanes, Villar, Senate President Rilon.
13 senators are present. The chair declares the presence of a quorum. The majority leader is recognized.
Just the acting majority leader, Mr. President.
The acting majority leader is recognized.
Mr. President,
I stand corrected.
I move that we dispense with the reading of the Journal of the 41st Session, Monday, December 7, 2015, and consider the same as approved.
Any objection? Hearing none. Reading of the journal of the previous session is hereby dispensed with, and the same is hereby approved.
Mr. President, I move that we proceed with the reference of business.
The Can we defer the reference of business and avail of the presence of our colleagues on a number of bills that are up for consideration?
Certainly, Mr. President. With the consent of the Senate, then, I move that we consider proposed Senate Resolution number 1676.
Any objection? Hearing none, proposed Senate Resolution 1676 is hereby consideration of measure is in order. Very important measure, Mr. Majority Leader.
Yes, Mr. President. So, with the consent of the Senate, may we request the Secretary to read the title and text of the measure?
Yes. The Secretary is directed to read with emphasis on the beneficiary of the proposal.
PS Resolution number 1676, introduced by Senator Paulo Benigno Bam A. Aquino IV. Resolution congratulating and commending Senator Lauren Legarda for her appointment as a global champion for resilience by the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, UNISDR. Whereas valiant efforts to champion the environment, sustainability, and preparedness in the face of natural disasters resulting from environmental degradation must be emphatically commended, considering the increasing concern and urgent call across the global community to address threats to the environment and prepare for the assault of climate change, particularly among nations like the Philippines that are most vulnerable to its effects. Whereas Senator Lauren Legarda is a staunch advocate for the environment, climate change adaptation, and disaster risk reduction, and has received various local and international awards and commendations for her advocacy, including the World Economic Forum Global Leaders for Tomorrow 2000, United Nations Environment Program Laureate 2001, UNISDR Hero of Resilience 2012, and the University of the Philippines Distinguished Alumni for Environment Protection and Climate Change Adaptation 2013. Whereas Senator Legarda is the chairperson of the Senate Committees on Climate Change, Cultural Communities, and Finance. Whereas under the leadership of Senator Legarda, concerned government departments and agencies including the Mines and Geosciences Bureau, MGB, Department of Environment and Natural Resources, Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology, Philippine Atmospheric Geophysical and Astronomical Services Administration, National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council, Bureau of Fire Protection, Department of Interior and Local Government, Department of Finance, Department of Budget and Management, National Economic and Development Authority, Department of Education, Department of Health, and the Department of Foreign Affairs opted into the coordinated initiative to streamline the efforts of the Philippine government in pursuing disaster risk reduction and mitigating the consequences of climate change. Whereas Senator Legarda has proven her commitment to the protection and preservation of the environment through the passage of landmark laws in the Senate, such as the Clean Air Act, RA 8749, Conservation and Protection of Wildlife Resources, RA 9147, Environmental Awareness Education Act, RA 9512, Renewable Energy Act, RA 9513, Ecological Solid Waste Management Act, RA 9003, Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Act, RA 10121, People's Survival Fund Law, RA 10174, and the Climate Change Act, RA 9729. Whereas Senator Legarda remains resolute in appealing to the global community on behalf of nations most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, addressing world leaders and delegates to step up to the responsibility of improving the resilience of communities and averting the consequences of climate change in international forums such as the Global Platform on Disaster Risk and Disaster Reduction, Global Humanitarian Forum, the Human Impact of Climate Change, Switzerland, 15th Conference of Parties of the United Nations Frameworks Convention on Climate Change Conference, Denmark, the 3rd United Nations World Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction, Japan, and the Integrated Research on Disaster Risk Conference 2014, China. Whereas Senator Legarda championed women's rights and asserted their active role in environmental protection, disaster risk reduction, and climate change through her participation in international fora, such as investing in women's leadership for climate solutions by the Global Gender and Climate Alliance, Women in Parliament's Global Forum Annual Summit, Belgium, Asia-Europe Meeting Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction and Management, Manila, World Assembly for Women, Japan, high-level multi-stakeholder partnership dialogue in mobilizing women's leadership in disaster risk reduction, Japan. Whereas UNIDSR recognizes individuals as disaster risk reduction champions for using their political influence to advocate for disaster risk reduction in the country, region, and beyond. These disaster risk reduction champions receive a letter of designation that may only be issued by the UN Secretary General's Special Representative for Disaster Risk Reduction and head of UNISDR. Whereas Senator Legarda was first recognized as the Asia-Pacific Regional Champion for Disaster Risk Reduction during the 3rd Asian Ministerial Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia in 2008. Whereas Senator Legarda was then recognized at the Paris UN Climate Conference COP21 and was appointed by UNISDR as its Global Champion for Resilience on November 30, 2015. She is honored to be the second global leader bestowed with this recognition following the appointment of the former Indonesian President Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono as the first global champion of disaster risk reduction in 2011. Whereas according to the UNISDR, the global champion for disaster risk reduction is a distinguished role to provide leadership to build the resilience of nations and communities from disasters. These champions advocate and promote the goals and priorities of the Yogo Framework for Action and the new Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, encourage the highest political leadership in countries to increase investment in disaster risk reduction and promote disaster risk reduction to a wider set of decision makers to influence opinion and action for sustainable development. Now, therefore, be it resolved as it hereby resolved that the Senate of the Philippines commend Senator Loren Legarda for being a relentless crusader for the environment and congratulate the good senator on her appointment as the Global Champion for Resilience by the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, UNISDR.
Mr. President, I move that all senators present be made co-authors of the resolution.
Any objection? Hearing none, all senators present are considered co-authors of the resolution 1676, commending Senator Loren Legarda.
Mr. President, I move that we approve proposed Senate Resolution number 1676, subject to style.
The style is already good. You want to add some more?
I'll just move to approve then, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none. Proposed Senate Resolution 1676 is considered as adopted, subject to style.
Move to suspend for a few minutes to congratulate our colleague, Mr. President.
Okay. Happy birthday. Congratulations. There is no plaque yet, so we got. Here pala. I'm sorry, I need to na. Oh, can all the co-authors come up and I have the child sign it. Do I have to sign this? Si Sarah Sanchez. Sinong, who's the, yung script ba? Yung sa LTO? Ha? Ang script sa LTO? We can pass it on second reading today. Sa, ano na? Session is resumed. The minority leader is recognized.
Mr. President,
Majority leader, yeah.
we are in receipt of the Conference Committee report on the conflicting provisions of Senate Bill 2622 and House Bill 5587 on the Biofuels Act. Copies of the report have been distributed to the senators. So, Mr. President, with the consent of the Senate, I move that we consider the aforesaid Conference Committee report.
Any objections? Hearing none. Consideration of the Bicameral Conference Committee report on the disagreeing provisions of Senate Bill 2622 and House Bill 5587 is in order.
Mr. President, I move that we recognize the sponsor, Senator Osmeña, to present the report.
Senator Sergio Osmeña is recognized to present the report.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, the Senate BICAM Committee has the honor to report back to this chamber and present the joint explanation of the Conference Committee on the disagreeing provisions of Senate Bill number 2622 and House Bill number 5587. May I proceed, Mr. President?
Please proceed.
The Conference Committee on the disagreeing provisions of Senate Bill 2622 and House Bill 5587, after having met and fully discussed the subject matter in a conference, hereby report to their respective houses the following. That, number 1, the conferees agreed to use the House version as the working draft. 2, for the title, the conferees agreed to use the House version. Number 3, Section 1 of the Senate version was adopted as Section 1 of the reconciled version with amendment to read as follows. Section 1. Section 5 of Republic Act number 9367, otherwise known as the Biofuels Act of 2006, is hereby amended to read as follows. Section 5. Mandatory use of biofuels. Pursuant to the above policy, it is hereby declared that all liquid fuels for motors and engines sold in the Philippines shall contain locally sourced biofuels component as follows. 5.3. Within 3 months from the effectivity of this Act, a minimum of 1% biodiesel by volume shall be blended into all diesel engine fuels sold in the country, provided that the biodiesel blend conforms to PNS for biodiesel. Within 2 years from the effectivity of this Act, the NBB created under this Act is empowered to determine the feasibility and thereafter recommend to the DOE to mandate a minimum of 2% blend of biodiesel by volume, which may be increased taking into account considerations including but not limited to domestic supply and availability of locally sourced biodiesel component, provided that natural gas power generating plants may use neat diesel as their alternative fuel during shortages of natural gas supplies, provided, however, that the DOE shall ensure that the authority granted herein shall only be availed of directly or indirectly by natural gas power plants, unquote. 4. Section 2 of the Senate version and Section 2 of the House version are similar and thus were adopted without amendments as Section 2 of the reconciled version. 5. Section 3 of the Senate version and Section 3 of the House version are similar and thus were adopted without amendments as Section 3 of the reconciled version. 6. Section 4 of the Senate version and Section 4 of the House version are similar and thus were adopted without amendments as Section 4 of the reconciled version. 7. Section 5 of the Senate version and Section 5 of the House version are similar and thus were adopted without amendments as Section 5 of the reconciled version. 8. Finally, for the title of the House version was adopted and amended to read as follows: an act allowing natural gas power generating plants in the country to use neat diesel as an alternative fuel, exempting them from the requirements of paragraph 5.3, Section 5 of Republic Act 9367, otherwise known as the Biofuels Act of 2006. In case of a conflict between the statements/amendments stated in this joint explanatory statement and that of the provisions of the consolidated bill in the accompanying conference committee report, the provisions of the latter shall prevail. Thank you, Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I move that we adopt the conference committee report on the conflicting provisions of Senate Bill 2622 and House Bill number 5587 on the Biofuels Act.
Any objection? Hearing none, the bicameral conference committee report on Senate Bill number 2622 and House Bill 5587, together with its explanation, is hereby adopted.
Mr. President, there are 18 House bills on the agenda which are all calling for the establishment of LTO or Land Transportation Office district and extension offices covered by items 7B to S of the agenda for the day. With the consent of the Chamber, I move to transfer these House bills: House Bill 216 under Committee Report 314, House Bill 273 under Committee Report 304, House Bill 540 under Committee Report 308, House Bill 577 under Committee Report 315, House Bill 696 under Committee Report 317, House Bill 1246 under Committee Report 319, House Bill 2028 under Committee Report 305, House Bill 2095 under Committee Report 307, House Bill 2188 under Committee Report 302, House Bill 2592 under Committee Report 318, House Bill 2606 under Committee Report 310, House Bill 2716 under Committee Report 311, House Bill 3217 under Committee Report 316, House Bill 4404 under Committee Report 313, House Bill 4421 under Committee Report 312, House Bill 4784 under Committee Report 303, House Bill 5085 under Committee Report 309, House Bill 5825 under Committee Report 306. I move that we transfer them from the calendar for ordinary business to the calendar for special orders.
Any objection to the motion of the Majority Leader to transfer the local bills which pertains to the establishment or conversion of the offices of the Land Transportation Office in various localities, that these be transferred to the calendar for special orders? Any objections? Hearing none, approved.
Mr. President, with the consent of the body, I move to consider on second reading the said House Bill, the said 18 House Bills, without prejudice to the insertion of their title and text into the record and journal of the Senate.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Mr. President, I move to recognize the sponsor of the measure, Senator Osmeña.
Senator Osmeña is recognized to sponsor these local bills.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I rise to present for the Senate's approval 18 House bills seeking the establishment of the regular district offices of the Land Transportation Office in key cities and municipalities in this country. These bills are as follows: House Bill number 216 under Committee Report 314, entitled An Act Converting the Land Transportation Office, in parentheses LTO, Extension Office, located in the municipality of Agoo, province of La Union, into a regular LTO district office and appropriating funds therefore, introduced by Representatives Erigel, Sarmiento, and Ungab. Number 2, House Bill number 273 under Committee Report 304, entitled An Act Converting the Bayawan City Land Transportation, in parentheses LTO, Extension Office into a regular LTO district office, introduced by Representatives Teves, Sarmiento, and Ungab. Semicolon. Number 3, House Bill number 540 under Committee Report 308, entitled An Act Establishing a District Office of the Land Transportation Office LTO in the City of Bacoor, Province of Cavite, and appropriating funds therefore, introduced by Representatives Mercado Revilla, Sarmiento, and Ungab. Number 4, House Bill number 577 under Committee Report 315, entitled An Act Establishing a Land Transportation Office in the Municipality of Nabunturan, Compostela Valley Province, and appropriating funds therefore, introduced by Representative Zamora, Sarmiento, and Ungab. Number 5, House Bill number 696 under Committee Report 317, entitled An Act Establishing the Orani Land Transportation Extension Office in the Municipality of Orani, Province of Bataan, and appropriating funds therefore, introduced by Representatives Roman, Sarmiento, Ungab, Colmenares, Zarate, and Ridon. Number 6, House Bill number 1246 under Committee Report 319, entitled An Act Establishing a Satellite Office in the Land Transportation Office in the Municipality of Irosin, Sorsogon, and appropriating funds therefore, introduced by Representatives Ramos, Sarmiento, and Ungab. Number 7, House Bill number 2028 under Committee Report 305, entitled An Act Establishing a Land Transportation LTO District Office in the City of Antipolo, Province of Rizal, and appropriating funds therefore, introduced by Representatives Acop, Sarmiento, and Ungab. Number 8, House number 2095 under Committee Report 307, entitled An Act Converting the Land Transportation Office LTO Extension Office located in the Municipality of Santa Maria, Province of Bulacan, into a regular LTO District Office, and appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes, introduced by Representatives Villarica, Sarmiento, Ungab, and Pancho. Number 9, House Bill number 2188 under Committee Report number 302, entitled An Act Establishing a Land Transportation Office LTO District Office in the City of Baybay, Province of Leyte, and appropriating funds therefore, introduced by Representatives Cari, Sarmiento, and Ungab. Number 10, House Bill number 2592 under Committee Report 318, entitled An Act Converting the Land Transportation Satellite Office as District Office in District 2, Parañaque City, and providing funds therefore, introduced by Representatives Tambunting, Sarmiento, and Ungab. Number 11, House Bill number 2606 under Committee Report number 310, an act entitled An Act Establishing a District Office of the Land Transportation Office LTO in the Municipality of La Libertad, Province of Negros Oriental, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes, introduced by Representatives EY, Sarmiento, and Ungab. Number 12, House of Representatives number 2716 under Committee Report 311, entitled An Act Converting the Land Transportation Office LTO Extension Office located in the City of Cabadbaran, Agusan del Norte, into a regular LTO District Office, and appropriating funds therefore, introduced by Representatives Amante, Sarmiento, and Ungab. Number 13, House Bill number 3217 under Committee Report number 316, an act converting the Cabacan Land Transportation Office, in parentheses LTO Extension Office in the Municipality of Cabacan, Province of Cotabato, into a regular LTO District Office, introduced by Representatives Tejada, Sarmiento, and Ungab. Number 14, House Bill number 4404 under Committee Report 313, entitled An Act Establishing a District Office of the Land Transportation Office LTO in the Municipality of Carmona, Province of Cavite, and appropriating funds therefore, introduced by Representatives Loyola, Sarmiento, and Ungab. Number 15, House number 4421 under Committee Report number 312, entitled An Act Establishing a Land Transportation Office in the Municipality of Malita, Province of Davao Occidental, and appropriating funds therefore, introduced by Representatives Bautista, Sarmiento, and Ungab. Number 16, House Bill number 4784, under Committee Report number 303, entitled An Act Converting the Land Transportation LTO Office, Extension Office, located in the city of Tagaytay, province of Cavite, into a regular district office and appropriating funds therefore, introduced by Representatives Tolentino, Sarmiento, Ungab, and Barzaga. Number 17, House Bill number 5085, under Committee Report 309, entitled An Act Converting the Goa Camarines Sur Extension Office of the Land Transportation Office LTO into a regular LTO Class D, as in David, district office to be located in the municipality of Tigaon, province of Camarines Sur, introduced by Representatives Fuentebella, Sarmiento, and Ungab. And number 18, House Bill number 5825, under Committee Report number 306, entitled An Act Establishing a District Office of the Land Transportation Office in the province of Sarangani and appropriating funds therefore, introduced by Representatives Pacquiao, Sarmiento, and Ungab. Mr. President, we transact business with the Land Transportation Office to register our motor vehicles and apply for or renew our driver's licenses. Ideally, the registration of our vehicles completed or to obtain our driver's license should last less than a week, and the process of signing and giving our signatures and fingerprint and photograph should take less than an hour. Unfortunately, that is not the experience that we encounter every time we go to the LTO. We wait for hours and endure long queues. Others have to travel from distant places just to get to the nearest regular LTO district office. For these reasons, the Senate Committee on Public Services, jointly with the Committee on Finance, heard 18 House bills creating regular LTO district offices to ease the difficulties that our people encounter in areas where there have been reported congestion of transactions or are quite inaccessible to people from nearby towns. In the committee hearings, we invited representatives from the LTO to verify the urgency of putting up additional regular LTO district offices in the 18 proposed locations. The LTO did not register any objection to these applications, but requested that funding be provided to cover for the additional manpower and operational requirements. The committee addressed this concern by including in the General Appropriations Act the budgetary requirements for each of the proposed LTO district offices. Mr. President, we followed objective standards in crafting these bills to avoid a case-to-case basis approach in the creation of regular LTO district offices. We want to be able to put up offices in identified priority areas based on reasonable criteria such as the volume of transactions and revenue collections. In this manner, we can have a more efficient use of our limited resources. With 18 additional regular LTO district offices, we will make it less burdensome for our people to obtain their driver's licenses or register their motor vehicles in these areas. This would also declog the workload of existing LTO district offices that have previously served the residents who will now be handled by these proposed regular LTO district offices. We do need to put up more regular LTO district offices in other areas in the country, especially with car manufacturers reporting an increase in sales in recent years. But with the help of our counterparts in the House of Representatives and the kind assistance of our LTO officials, we will be able to identify these priority areas and fast-track the creation of more economically viable regular LTO district offices. Thus, the approval of the aforementioned House bills, as amended by the Senate, is earnestly sought. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Osmania. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, there are no reservations for interpellations on the 18 bills, so with the consent of the Chamber, I move that we close the period of interpellation on all 18 bills.
Period for interpellation. Any objection is terminated.
Just a minute suspension, Mr. President.
1 minute suspension. Huh?
uniform.
Ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session is resumed.
Mr. President, after conferring with the sponsor, I move that we suspend consideration of the 18 bills under consideration by the body. So move.
Approved.
Mr. President, before we move to the next bill, may we just recognize some guests in the gallery. We have with us from the Department of Labor, Assistant Secretary Joji Aragon, the Chief of Bureau Working Conditions, Mr. Nicanor Bon, Dr. Jeremias Florante of the Occupational Safety and Health Center. We also have Barangay Chairman Domingo Vacal, Kagawad Ramon Cheng. I move that they be recognized, Mr. President.
Our guests from the Department of Labor and Employment are recognized for the record, and we greet them on the day of the Dole's anniversary.
Thank you, Mr. President. With the consent of the Senate, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill 2671 under Committee Report 105. This is the bill on salary standardization 4.
Right. Any objection? Hearing none, in order.
Mr. President, the parliamentary status of the measure is that we reopen the period of interpellations. I thus move that we recognize the sponsor, Senator Trillanes.
Senator Trillanes is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, there are no other members who have signified their intention to interpellate. I thus move that we close the period of interpellation.
Any objection to the closure of the period of interpellation on Senate Bill 2671? Chair hears none, so terminated.
Mr. President, move that we open the period of committee amendments.
Period for committee amendments are in order.
There are no committee amendments, Mr. President.
Move to close, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none.
I move that we open the period of individual amendments.
Period for individual amendments is in order. Senator Soto is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the distinguished sponsor accept an individual amendment that is being proposed by Senator Onasan?
Yes, Mr. President. I'd be honored.
Yes, I understand yesterday that Senator Onasan was proposing an amendment to the distinguished sponsor to Senate Bill 2671. This is in relation to the suspension of the automatic indexation feature of the pension benefits of retired military and uniformed personnel. So, may I propose that on page 15, lines 10 to 15, we delete the entire paragraph so that it will be uniform, Mr. President.
So, can the chair have it again?
Page 15,
Yes.
lines 10 to 15.
Lines 10 to 15.
Yes, delete the entire paragraph.
Delete the entire paragraph. What does the sponsor say?
I'll move to suspend, Mr. President.
1 minute suspension.
we ready to resume, Mr. President?
Session is resumed.
Well, having heard the position of the minority leader, we totally understand that the interests of the veterans or the retirees are being pursued. However, because of severe budgetary constraints, that specific amendment cannot be accommodated at this time, Mr. President. However, there are a couple of bills that we intend to pursue that will push for the interests of the retirees, Mr. President. So at this time, we would be constrained to reject the amendment of the minority leader, Mr. President.
With much regret.
Yes, thank you very much. Mr. President, with the assurance that the issue will be tackled in two forthcoming bills, then we are, on our part, constrained to accept the position of the gentleman. So I will inform the Assistant Minority Leader also, the Senator Nasan, about
Thank you.
the proposal. Thank you. I withdraw the motion, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Soto. The sponsor has the floor.
Likewise, we thank the graciousness and the understanding of the minority floor leader, Mr. President.
Mr. Majority Leader.
There being no other members who wish to propound amendments, Mr. President, I move that we close the period of individual amendments.
Period for amendments is terminated.
Mr. President, I move that we approve on second reading Senate Bill 2671 under Committee Report 105.
Any objection? Hearing none. Approve on second reading.
Mr. President, with the consent of the Senate, I move that we resume consideration of
Can we
Senate...
suspend consideration of the measure first?
Yes, Mr. President, I'm sorry. I move that we suspend consideration of the SSL4.
So, consideration of the measure is suspended.
Mr. President, with the consent of the Senate, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill 2951 under Committee Report 251. This bill pertains to the proposed Agricultural Competitiveness Enhancement Fund.
In order.
Sir President, the parliamentary status of the measure is that the sponsor delivered the sponsorship speech last September 16, 2015. I move that we open the period of interpellations.
Period for interpellation is in order.
I move that we recognize the sponsor, Senator Villar.
Senator Villar is recognized.
I move that we recognize Senator Osmeña to interpolate on the measure.
Senator Osmeña is recognized in the period of interpellation.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, would the kind sponsor yield the floor?
Yes, Mr. President. We are ready for the questions of our good friend from the South.
Mr. President, this representation had been loudly objecting to the implementation of the ASEP fund, which was established by Congress by the passage of Republic Act 8178, or the Tarification Act of 1996, which was in keeping with our commitment to the WTO Uruguay round, where we would remove all quantitative restrictions and move products, if we wish, to tarification, in order that other countries would be able to export their products to us, regardless of whether it competed with a product that we ourselves produced. That was a good move. We agreed with that, and the whole country then acceded to the World Trade Organization. Now, Mr. President, as part of the Tarification Act, the Agricultural Competitive Enhancement Fund was formed, from which collections on the MAB, or the minimum access volume, would be placed in a special account, which this representation was able to obtain from the Department of Treasury, and it is now known as Fund 183. And thus far, Mr. President, the report that we have before us as of June 30, 2015 show that total actual collections in Fund 183, or the ASEP fund, has amounted to 12,839,000,000 and change. Would the good sponsor like to confirm that? 12.8 billion.
So it's the total collection of the fund 183 is 12,839,576,953.83.
That's as of June 30.
December 31, 2014.
2014 or 2015?
2014. That's the latest figure they gave us.
All right,
December
because
31, 2014.
my numbers here show 2015, and this, I think, was submitted by the COCAFAM.
Mr. President, the amount as of December 31, 2014 and June 2015 are the same. It did not move.
Why did it not move?
I think the government did not accumulate for ASEF, and they suspended the operation of ASEF, so there's no movement.
But is it not, Mr. President, that what was suspended was the lending of funds, but the collection had to continue because
They stopped collection. They stopped recording also. They stopped the remittance.
by what authority did they have?
They did not.
To stop
They did not
collection.
remit. So that's why if we continue with the ASEF, then we have to force them to remit, because they think that we stopped the operation of ASEF, so they did not have to remit. But I guess if we follow up with them, they will remit, because that is the provision of the law.
Now, Mr. President, when we established Fund number 183, and that had to be specifically established because although we passed the Tarification Act sometime towards the end of 1996,
Yes.
it was only in 98 that we were able to get that fund up and running, is because that fund is in the computer of all ports of entry in this country.
Yes.
So when a good comes in and the MAB is collected, the minimum access volume is collected, it's recorded to that fund. So it would take an order from the Secretary of Agriculture or the Bureau of Treasury to stop the collection of that fund, because this is just an accounting entry in the computer of the customs of the where the port is located.
Mr. President, I think they have collected, but they are not remitting. And I guess if we force them to remit, they will remit.
All right. So at least that is being
Yeah,
recorded.
Yeah.
All right. About how much was not remitted? Are we collecting about $1 billion a year, $1.5 billion a year?
I think it's 1B a year.
Okay. Now, Mr. President, by virtue of that same report, the total amount available now in Fund 183 amounts to roughly 3.7 billion pesos. Am I correct?
Yes.
So therefore, what had been lent out or given out or gifted to others amounted to a little over 9 billion pesos.
Yes, Mr.
Now, what
President.
is the status of the 9 billion? How much of the 9 billion is uncollectible? How much is?
Mr. President, out of the 9 billion, I think, and as per record, 2.576 billion were given as grant to the following. You want me to read the grant?
Yes, please.
Okay. It's Bureau of Harvest Research and Extension, 500,000, partially.
Is that 500,000 or 500 million? 500
partially
million.
liquidated. And then National Agribusiness Corporation.
May I interrupt you?
Yes.
Yes. What do you mean by partially liquidated?
It's not fully liquidated.
I
The
see.
report
So
is not
a
complete.
lump sum had been given to them in 2007,
Mhm.
and 8 years later, it's not yet fully liquidated.
Yes.
How much is not liquidated?
Of all the, only 200,000 is fully liquidated.
200 million, you mean?
200 million. I'm sorry. Only 200 million is fully liquidated, and then I think partially liquidated is give me that number. Nasaan yung
300 million is the balance.
Okay. 200 million fully liquidated. Partially liquidated is 1,235,000,000, and no liquidation report is 1,140,000,000.
All right, and then the next item would be,
The loans.
is this a loan to the National Agribusiness Corp?
Yeah. It's a grant to the National Agribusiness Corps or NABCOR of 225 million, partially liquidated. And another one again to NABCOR, 300 million, partially liquidated. And another one to NABCOR, 500 million, partially liquidated. And then to Aurora State University, Baler, partially liquidated. And then LGU Aurora, 200 million, fully liquidated, implemented by the DPWH. And then Palawan State University, 10 million, partially liquidated. DA 4B, Plant Quarantine Service Operation, 100 million, partially liquidated. Aklan State University, almost 15 million, partially liquidated. Iloilo City Abattoir, 11 million, partially liquidated. And local government of Gimbal, Iloilo Abattoir, 15 million, partially liquidated. And sugar regulatory are not liquidated. And then the Sugar Regulatory Administration, 600 million, partially liquidated.
Now, Mr. President, let's take the last item first. The SRA, the Sugar Regulatory Administration, why would they be entitled to a grant of 600 million?
They were given by the committee a grant of 600 million for the sugar industry, and they wrote to us that they divided it among how many mills? Mill district, the proceed of the 600 million, and they were able to liquidate the, how many, 26? And they were able to liquidate 24 mill district, but they were not able to liquidate for the 2 mill district, which amounts to 10 million. Okay. So they were able to liquidate.
They practically were able to liquidate
Yes,
everything.
except for 10 million, and they said if it cannot be liquidated, they will pay for it.
They have a lot of money.
Just
All right.
for the clarification with the prohibition of Senator Osmania, when we say liquidated,
They
in
have
case,
the support.
in other words, if it is a grant,
Yes.
the liquidation of the amount spent.
Yes.
If it is a loan, liquidation means payment of the loan.
Payment, yes.
Yeah.
But this first 2.5 billion are all grants.
Okay.
So these are the status of the grants.
Okay.
So that leaves us with a balance of 6.5 billion.
5.8 billion.
Okay. May we have the status of the balances? in
The current
5.8?
is 169 million. The fully paid is 274 million. Approved but did not avail 119 million. Not released yet 229 million. Partial releases only 380 million. Deceased borrower 82 million. With request to restructuring 4.6 billion. With payment more than 50% of the total due 1.7 billion. With payment less than 50% of the total due 342 million. Without payment is 2.5 billion. Not to avail the unreleased fund 90 million.
All right, so 4.6 billion are in default.
So due for collection is 4.7 billion. Actual collection it's 875 million, and arrears is 3.860 billion.
Yes, we'd like to have an aging schedule because some of these loans were granted in 1998 and 99 and never even paid, not even 1 centavo. May we have a detailed list?
Mr. President, I'm sorry we've been asking them for a detailed list. They were not able to give us. But even the, what do you call this? The PIDS report, the Philippine Institute of Development Studies, the research arm of NEDA, studied this ASEF, reviewed this ASEF, and they were not able also to get the names, di ba? The ones they get would be where the places, the regions where it was lent out. So we really had a hard time going back, and yet the ASEF will expire by this month. So we thought that since this is passed, maybe we can collect this. We can have some sort of a strategy wherein we can get back this money. But at the same time, we want to extend the ASEF with a new policy that will help the small farmers and fishermen, because it is unfair to them that we will stop the program just because it did not work well in the past.
Yes, but unless we make the corrections, unless we find out who are those people who have not paid.
No, but in the coming ASEF that we are going to extend, I'm sure these people will not be able to avail of this ASEF anymore because we are limiting it to small, medium, and micro enterprises.
All right.
We're setting a limit of 5 million per transaction. Before, from 1999 to 2010, there's no funding limit. And they changed it from 2010 to present. There was a funding limit of 15 million. Now we're bringing it down to 5 million to make sure that the one who will avail of this would be the medium, micro, and small enterprises.
Thank you for that, Your Honor. Mr. President, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And
No, we're
it
asking,
happens-
before, it was the committee, COCOFAM, was lending out this grant and loans.
It was
Now
not the
it would be
COCOFAM.
the land bank.
The Coca Farm never lent out. It was the committee at the Department of Agriculture.
Yeah, now we're changing it to the land bank.
That's good. Would you be able to estimate how many loans you would be able to give out every year? If you were able to lend a maximum of 5 million pesos per borrower, you would be limiting yourself to 200 borrowers with a collection of 1 billion pesos.
Yeah, but there is a fund that is accumulated in addition to this. To this 1 billion a year, there is a fund that is left which is around 3 billion. And then, as we said, they have collected something that they have remitted. We estimate that to be something like 2 billion. So in total, it's 5 billion plus 1 billion every year. So it will not be just limited to 1 billion.
Yes. Now, I understand that the bill also proposes that so many percent would be utilized for, you call it
10%
grants?
will be given to CHED for scholarship for children of farmers and fishermen. 10% will be given to the deserving SUCs for research and development, but limited to 5 million also per grant. And then the rest, the 80%, will be given to the land bank for them to lend out to micro, small, and medium enterprises at minimal interest at 5%, 5 million maximum for each transaction.
All right. So the land bank will now be the committee that lends out. There'll be
Yes.
the committee that checks the credit. There'll be the committee that will set up all of the conditions,
Yes.
covenants for the loan agreement.
Yeah.
But there's still about 5 billion pesos plus that have to be collected. Who would be tasked to collect the 5 billion?
Yung ano ba? It will go straight. No, it will go straight na, automatic. 80% will go to land bank, 10% will go to CHED, and 10% will go to the CHED also to be given to the SUCs.
All right, let me be more
It
specific.
will not pass
the land
through-
bank does not know the borrower. In the
Which
past.
one?
The ones who borrowed and did not pay back. The
Yeah,
land bank does not know
because
who
they
are.
were just doing the work of cashiering. They're just disbursing what the committee approved.
So what we're asking, what we're inquiring is only those who know who those borrowers are usually should be tasked with collecting from those borrowers who are now in
So,
default.
finally, they gave the list of approved assets project by region, by name as of June 30, 2015. We have the list. Finally, we have
All right.
the list.
Yes, but
so,
who collects?
I think the one who will take care of this would be the committee who disbursed this. It's not the land bank.
That's
Oo.
right.
But the
they
land
would
bank
have-
will do the new one.
But they would have to be responsible to the land bank now.
Yes.
You know, we might see a situation wherein employee ako ng Department of Agriculture, hindi ako susunod sa land bank.
Yeah. Maybe
Pero
you can
dapat
put
yung
that.
magiging
Wala tayong provision.
bastonero dito, yung land bank. Di ba?
Yeah. Okay. Mr. President, when we did the bill, we thought of the new system of doing ASEF, but we did not consider what has gone before and what we will do with this problem before. So maybe our good senator will make an amendment on how, or the process, or we will study how to deal with this problem and put it in the new bill.
We can do that in 24 hours.
Yes.
Can the chair seek a clarification, Senator Osmeña, with your permission? From the debate, it would appear that there are two aspects being discussed insofar as the funds
ASEF.
are concerned. The first one are those past due,
Yes.
or those which were past due when the funds were being managed by the committee.
Yes.
The second one is the one after this bill is passed, when the matter of lending, looking at the credit standing, capacity to pay, will now be done by the land bank. First, is that a correct proposition?
Yes, that's the idea,
No.
Mr. President.
The question of Senator Osmeña, from the way I can gather it, first, who is now responsible for the collection of the past due accounts?
Yeah.
Who will be responsible for that?
We were silent on that. So if we're silent, then it's DA.
Who?
Department of Agriculture, the committee created in the Department of Agriculture, who managed this fund before, together with the other members,
I would
provided for by the law. Because we're silent. But as I told Senator Osmeña, maybe we can not be silent and decide what to do now with regards
yes.
to the collection of this past due.
The inclination of the chair is let's pin the responsibility on some office to do the collection
Yes.
rather than be silent.
Yes.
Now, On the second aspect of the situation, in the future, since Land Bank is now responsible for lending, for cashiering, for determination of capacity to pay, etc., in case of default, Land Bank will be obligated to collect.
Yes.
Is that not for the record?
They will be the one in charge of everything.
Okay.
So they will be responsible.
All right. So
And anyway, the Land Bank is a government bank, so we can ask
yeah. Okay.
government
Just
to-
so for the record. Thank you, Senator Osmeña.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, land banks are government banks. Department of Agriculture is a government department. And they've messed this up completely.
I think they are not in the business of doing this, and they took the responsibility. So we're giving it to an institution.
You're absolutely correct. And if you read the records of 1999, you will see that I said that.
Yes.
They had no business lending out because they don't know the business.
Maybe Senator Osmeña, Senator Villar, you may wish to consider assigning the duty to collect either with the OSG, Office of the Solicitor General, or the Office of the Government Corporate Council, rather than the Department of Agriculture, who does not really have the capacity to collect. They're not a collecting agency. They have no lawyers that would be capable of filing collection suits. You may wish to consider either specifically tasking the Office of the Solicitor General or the Office of the Government Corporate Council.
Thank you, Mr. President. Unfortunately, there's going to be a fly in the ointment. You see, when they set up the rules for lending, they said it would be interest-free and collateral-free. And I remember I even asked the better half of the current sponsor, how much in kickback could you afford to give? And he said, I can give 95% because I will still keep 5% as my own because I don't have to pay it back. And that's what we objected to in 1999. Unfortunately, the officers in charge paid no heed and they continued with the game. So therefore, we had a situation wherein the lenders didn't know the business. They're not in the business of lending. They're not in the business of producing. They were just mere agricultural employees in the various departments and in the various provinces. So what we'd have to do, Madam, is make sure that there would be interest and there will be some type of collateral. Is that in the bill?
It says there are minimal interest because we're not after the returns. We want to help these medium, micro, and small enterprises. But they said that if you give it to the land bank, you have to pay the land bank for its services. So we have to charge interest, low interest. It says here the Land Bank of the Philippines shall manage the credited facilities founded out of the fund and shall determine the eligibility requirement and set the required loan security or collateral of loan beneficiary. For this purpose, the Land Bank is hereby authorized to charge a management fee from the fund.
Yes. If I might be permitted to give my ideas on that, the concern with minimal interest is misplaced. The farmer today pays almost 40 to 50% interest. I mean, if you charge him 10, that's a big
Kasi sometimes
big
this land bank
discount on what he's
naman,
paying today.
they give the fund to the rural bank, the co-ops, and all this microfinancing institution. And sometimes it's this microfinancing institution which will charge high interest. So we just want to make sure that there should be minimal interest.
Yes,
that's
but
a
when
policy.
you say minimal interest, you only can impose that on the land bank.
Yeah, but they will be forced to do this because this is not their fund. It is our fund being managed by them. You know.
My point, Mr. President, is this. Pag ipitin mo yung land bank, and the purpose of the land bank in taking over this program is really to disseminate it
Yes,
far and
yes,
wide.
Yes.
And therefore, they will not be able to do that alone. The land bank has only
No,
about
they
300...
said that.
May I finish, please?
Okay.
The land bank only has 347 branches.
Yes.
So the land bank should really be assigning this to microfinance institutions and lending the money also to rural banks.
Yes.
And so those rural banks will have to earn a return.
Yes. Yes. They told me that they lend the money at 4% to small institutions, and in return, their moral suasion is for them to add up another 10% for their overhead. Yeah. But sometimes these institutions, they add more. So we're thinking that we should force them not to add too much. That's the only thing we're concerned
Well, that
about.
can be in the on-lending agreement
Yes.
between the land bank and the
Yes.
rural bank, or
Yes.
whichever institution they wish to partner with
Yes.
in helping the
Kasi kung
farmer. But what
14%.
I'm saying is that minimal interest is a misnomer, because what is minimal?
For me, that 4% plus 10% is okay.
14% is excellent for the
Yeah.
farmer.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
But
if
this
I,
is
if I used to pay 40% a year,
cost-free
bigyan mo
fund.
ako ng
Oo.
14%.
But this is a cost-free fund. It's from the government. So we don't really have to make money out of this, you know.
I'm saying I'm not concerned about that. I just want to make sure that the banks are competitive also. Now, what I'm saying, Mr. President, is that
So we can be more specific in the bill if you want
we
to.
must collect interest so that there's pressure to pay back. Because when
Yes.
you leave a balance and then there's interest on interest and it compounds,
Yeah.
there's even more pressure on the borrower to pay something back. But there must be some kind of collateral also.
Yes.
Otherwise, there's no pressure to
It
pay
says here they will set the required loan security or collateral of loan beneficiaries.
All right.
And then the land bank is hereby authorized to charge a management fee from the fund.
back. Yes.
So,
Now, there are three sources of funds at this time. One is those who have been lent out to, who are the
Not
borrowers
paid.
who have not paid. So that's the accounts receivable. Second is the in hand, which is about 3.8 billion. And third is the future collections from the MAV,
yes.
the minimum access volume. And concurrent with that, also whatever is paid back by those borrowers who are currently in default. Diba? All right. So, having said that, if the land bank properly deploys these funds to the little farmer, maybe we should lower the maximum to 2 million so that more farmers will be
No,
able
it's the maximum yung 5. It's not the minimum. They can borrow 500, 1 million.
No, but I'm talking about maximum.
Because there is a medium-sized company. Baka sa medium-sized company, 5 million is Sa small and micro, it can be lower. But the medium-sized company,
That was supposed to be the intent of the
it's
original.
not all. It's
the
medium,
original
small,
intent.
and micro.
Okay, teka muna ha. Papakita ko po sa inyo. 10.9 million, 17 million, 1 billion, that's to Kedan Core. 20 million, 25 million, 25
naman.
million.
Yeah,
These
yeah.
are
There's something
rather
wrong.
large
Yes,
agricultural.
yes,
The little farmer never benefited
Yes.
from the ASEF. 12 million, 29 million, 6.9 million, 14.8 million, 11.9 million, 61 million. That's in Umingan, Pangasinan. 15 million, 30 million in La Union. 28.5 million, 30 million broiler in Pangasinan. 14 million, 9.9, 26. These are huge funds.
Okay. It doesn't matter
They
to
didn't
me.
pay interest. They have no collateral.
Maybe we can make an amendment if you want to lower it pa. Okay. It's acceptable.
Our concern, let them charge market interest rates, because the market interest rates being charged by the land bank is really very low compared to what the farmers
The
are
land
paying
bank, there's
today.
no problem with the land bank,
Yes.
but if they give it to other institutions, they charge more.
Yeah, that's
So
okay, but
maybe
they
we
will
can
never
set
be
a,
able to lend
yeah.
more than an optimum. And the land bank can hold them to that also,
Yeah.
because the land bank will be able to watch them. So,
We are that amendment would be acceptable during the period of amendment.
thank you, Mr. President. I think, subject to the preparation or the drawing up of that amendment,
Yes.
I'd like to close the period of interpellation and thank the gracious sponsor.
Thank you very
All
much,
right.
Mr. President, and thank you very much from the good senator from the South.
All right. Thank you, Senator Osmeña. Is there any other colleague of ours who have indicated that they will avail of the period of interpellation, Mr. Majority Leader?
No one else, Mr. President. I thus move that we close the period for interpellations.
Period for interpellation on Senate Bill number 2951 is hereby terminated.
I move that we suspend consideration of the ASEP bill, Mr. President.
Consideration of the measure is suspended.
Mr. President, with the consent of the Senate, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill 3002 under Committee Report 289. This bill pertains to the proposed farm tourism development, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, consideration of the measure is in order.
Mr. President, the parliamentary status of the measure is that we are in the period of interpellations. I move that we recognize the sponsor, again, Senator Villar.
Senator Villar is recognized on on Senate Bill 3002 under Committee Report 289. This is the bill to promote farm tourism. We are now in the period of interpellation.
Mr. President, I think nobody has indicated to interpolate because this is a very simple bill and this is just for the tourist farms around the country. So I would like to request that we pass it on second reading.
Yes, Senator Villar is correct. There are no members who have signified their intent to interpolate. I thus move that we close the period of interpellations, Mr.
Period.
President.
Any objection? Hearing none. Period for interpellation on Senate Bill 3002 is hereby terminated.
Mr. President, there are no committee amendments. I move that we open the period of committee amendments.
Committee amendment
Mr. President, we have no committee amendment.
I move that we close, Mr. President.
so terminated.
I move to open the period of individual amendments, Mr. President.
Mr. President, just one minor individual amendment. This is essentially a typographical error. On page 4, line 19, delete the acronym DTI and replace it with the acronym DOT. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none. Amendment is carried.
That is all, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. President.
Move to close the period of individual amendments, Mr. President.
So terminated.
I move that we approve on second reading Senate Bill 3002 under Committee Report 289.
Any objection? Hearing none. Senate Bill 3002 under Committee Report number 289 is hereby approved on second reading.
I move that we suspend consideration of
Mr.
Senate Bill
President, in
3002.
behalf of the tourist farms around the country, we thank you and the Senate for approving this bill. Thank you.
All
very
right. The consideration of the measure is suspended.
Mr. President, I move that we, with the consent of the Senate, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill 2990 under Committee Report 286. This is the Bill on Rare Diseases Act of the Philippines, Mr. President.
This is what? Can we have-
Rare diseases. It's the Bill on Rare Diseases, Mr.
all right.
President.
Any objection? Hearing none. In order.
Mr. President, the parliamentary status of the measure is that the period of committee amendments thereon had been terminated last December 1. I therefore move that we open the period of individual amendments.
The period for individual amendments is in order.
Mr. President, there are no
Yes, the sponsor, Senator Pia Cayetano, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. There are no individual amendments or no reservations, Mr. President.
I move that we close the period for individual amendments, Mr.
The period
President.
for individual amendments is terminated.
Mr. President, I move that we approve on second reading Senate Bill 2990 under Committee Report 286.
Any objection? Hearing none. Senate Bill 2990 under Committee Report 286 is hereby approved on second reading.
I move that we suspend consideration of Senate Bill 2990 under Committee Report 286.
Suspended.
Mr. President, With the consent of the Senate, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill 2967 under Committee Report 268. This is the bill on Philippine Deposit Insurance Corporation.
Consideration of Senate Bill 2967 is in order.
Mr. President, the parliamentary status of the measure is that the period of interpellations thereon had been terminated. I thus move that we open the period of committee amendments.
Period for committee amendments is in order.
I move that you recognize the sponsor, Senator Osmeña.
Senator Osmeña is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Our first amendment would fall on page 4, line 11.
Page
4, line 11. After the word directors, to delete the phrase for government-owned or controlled corporations, and in its stead to insert the phrase of the corporation. I submit, Mr. President.
Can I have a 1-minute suspension? The chair would like to
Yes.
get a copy of the... And what is this? What is this?
Just make...
With the permission of the chamber, the chair resumes the session. Yes. Any objection to the amendment proposed by the sponsor, on page 4, line 11 and 12? Any objection? Hearing none. Approved.
Our next amendment would fall on page 5, line 2 and 3.
Please proceed.
After the words lower than, to delete the words director 3, and in its place to insert the phrase assistant secretary. I submit, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none. Approved.
Then on page 6, line 16, to delete the phrase pursuant to Republic Act 10149. I submit, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none. Approved.
And on page 7, on line 18, to delete the phrase from time to time. I submit, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none. Approved.
On page 8, lines 8 to 12, to delete the sentence such as but not limited to Presidential Decree 985, Presidential Decree 1597, Republic Act 6758 as amended, and Joint Resolution Number 4, 2009, and Republic Act 10149. I submit, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none. Approved.
On page 9, line 23, to delete the phrase retire or.
Any objection? Hearing none. Approved.
On page 11, lines 3, 4, and 5, to delete the phrase and shall be the ceiling for fixing the salary, allowances, and other emoluments of all other personnel in the corporation. I submit, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none. Approved.
Next amendment would fall on page 14, line 4. After the words evidenced by a passbook, to delete the phrase check and or. I submit, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none. Approved.
And on line 6, to delete the word or. O-R. I submit, Mr. President.
Approved.
The next amendment would fall on page 16, line 24, to delete the word negotiable. I submit, Mr.
Any
President.
objection? Hearing none.
The next amendment would fall on page 21, lines 17 and 18, to delete the sentence have failed to meet the minimum capital requirements, and in its place to insert the phrase be capital deficient.
Any
submit, Mr.
objection?
President.
Hearing none, approved.
And on line 19, same page 21, after the word bank, to delete the phrase at any time. I submit, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Then on page 22, line 1, to add the phrase after the words resolution modes, to add the phrase under section 11 of this act. I submit, Mr.
Any
President.
objection? Hearing none, approved.
Then to delete lines 3 down to line 26. I'll read it if the chair so wishes, but it's pretty long.
It's not necessary. Maybe we can just have one motion to go up to page 23, line 3, because that's one paragraph.
That is correct.
So
I submit, Mr. President, delete lines 3 to 26 on page 22 and lines 1 to 3 on page 23.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Then on the next would come on page 25, line 16 to 21. To delete the 16
okay.
to 21, to delete the phrase that reads, provided that the collection of a special assessment may likewise be made for the purpose of reimbursing the national government for any financial assistance it may have extended to affected institutions or organizations during a systemic scenario. I submit, Mr.
Any
President.
objection? Hearing none, approved.
The next amendment would fall on page 27, lines 21 to 24, to delete lines 21 to 24. I submit, Mr.
Any
President.
objection? Hearing none, approved.
The next would fall after line 14 on page 32, and this is an addition.
Oh.
May I read, Mr. President? Subsection C. When there is a failure of prompt corrective action as declared by the Monetary Board due to capital deficiency, comma, the corporation, comma, in its duly authorized, no, the corporation, comma, its duly authorized officers or employees, comma, may examine, comma, inquire or look into the deposit records of a bank, colon, provided, comma, that, comma, such authority may not be exercised when the failure of prompt corrective action is due to grounds other than capital deficiency, period. For this purpose, banks, their officers and employees are hereby mandated to disclose and report to the corporation or its duly authorized officers, employees, deposit account information in said bank, period. I submit, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
And the continuation of that sentence falls on page 32, and it should read as follows, and this is an insertion. The corporation, its duly authorized officers or employees are prohibited from disclosing information obtained under this section to any person, government, official, bureau or office, period. Any act done pursuant to this section shall not be deemed as a violation of Republic Act 1405, as amended, Republic Act 6426, as amended, Republic Act number 8791, and other similar laws protecting or safeguarding the secrecy or confidentiality of bank deposits, provided, that any unauthorized disclosure of the information under this section shall be subject to the same penalty under the foregoing laws protecting the secrecy or confidentiality of bank deposits, period. I submit, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
And on line 15, to renumber, delete subsection letter C and insert in parentheses capitalized letter D, as in
Approved.
David. I submit, Mr. President.
Approved.
Our next, this is marked, but there's nothing here. Yes, Mr. President. Our next amendment would fall on page 33, line 8, to delete the letter D, as in subsection D, and insert the letter E. This is a renumbering, Mr.
Yes,
President.
approved.
Again, renumber on lines
letter.
1, 10, 16, 19, and 23 to exchange letters E, F, G, H, I to letters F, G, H, I, J. Renumbering. I submit, Mr. President.
Approved.
On page 35, line 13, after the phrase closed bank, to add the phrase in accordance with this act. I submit, Mr. President.
Approved.
Then on line, yes, anterior amendment, Mr. President, same page, page 35, line 3, there was a renumbering.
Yes.
On line 3 to change the letter J to K. I
Approved.
submit, Mr. President. And then on line 13, to remove the word, after the word purpose, comma, to remove the word the, T-H-E. I submit, Mr. President.
There appears to be another amendment
Then-
on 913, Senator
Yes.
Osmeña. Okay.
And to include the phrase, banks closed by the Monetary Board shall no longer be rehabilitated. I submit, Mr. President.
Before that,
The-
I see in my version, there is an amendment on line 13 after
In accordance
closed
with this
back,
act.
in accordance with this act.
Yes,
Is that-
Mr. President, after the words closed back in accordance with this act.
Any
to be
objection
inserted.
here? Approved. The deletion of the word the after purpose has been proposed. Any objection? Hearing none, approved. And the phrase banks
Banks.
closed by the Monetary Board shall no longer be rehabilitated. Any objection? Hearing none, approved. Please
And,
continue, Senator Osmeña.
You may continue for me, Mr. President. And on line 14, to delete the phrase following the clause in Section 30 of Republic Act 7653 as amended shall not be acceptable to banks. The receiver shall determine as soon as possible, but not later than 90 days from takeover, whether the institution may be rehabilitated or otherwise placed in such a condition that it may be permitted to resume business with safety to its depositors and creditors and the general public, provided that any determination for the resumption of business of the institution shall be subject to prior approval of the Monetary Board. I submit, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
The next amendment would fall on page 52, line 24, to delete the word not. I submit, Mr. President.
Page, sorry, 52.
Page 52, line 24, to delete word not. Not.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
The next would fall on page 60, line 23, to delete the letter G, as in subsection G, and to insert the number 9 in parentheses. I submit, Mr. President.
Approved.
The next amendment would fall on page 24, line 8 to
Page, I'm sorry.
74.
Page
74.
74.
Lines 8 to 20, to delete the following sentence. Within 6 months after the effectivity of this act, the corporation may be reorganized by the board of directors by adopting, if it so desires, an entirely new staffing pattern or organizational structure to suit the operations of the corporation under this act, pursuant to Republic Act 10149, period. No preferential or priority right shall be given to or enjoyed by any personnel for appointment to any position in the new staffing pattern, nor shall any personnel be considered as having prior or vested rights with respect to retention in the corporation or in any position which may be created in the new staffing pattern, even if he should be the incumbent of a similar position prior to the reorganization. The reorganization shall be completed within 6 months after the effectivity of this act. Personnel who are not retained are deemed separated from the service. I submit, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none.
And After that, right after that, a new amendment, an insertion, which will read as follows. Exempting clause, period, dash. The corporation shall be exempt from Presidential Decrees 985, comma, Presidential Decree number 1597, comma, Republic Act number 6758, comma, as amended, comma, Joint Resolution number 4, in parentheses 2009, and other laws on salary standardization. Presidential Decree number 1177, comma, Executive Order number 248 as amended, comma, Executive Order number 298, and the provisions of Republic Act number 10149 with regard to position classification, comma, qualification standards, comma, and the compensation package of the employees of the corporation, comma, and the per dimes, comma, emoluments, comma, and performance incentives of the president and members of the board, colon, provided, comma, that, comma, PDIC shall be subject to all other policies under Republic Act 10149, including, comma, but not limited to, comma, performance evaluation by the Governance Commission for government-controlled or for government-owned or controlled corporations, comma, selection and nomination of appointee of directors, comma, and limitations on the creation of subsidiaries and the acquisition of affiliates except in the case of acquisition of shares in the grant of financial assistance under this act, period. I submit, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
May I ask for a few minutes suspension, Mr.
1
President?
minute suspension.
Motion to resume, Mr. President.
Session is resumed.
Mr. President, the numbering is not on this page, but there is a sentence which I read earlier, which must not be included, and I shall read it now. And the per dimes, comma, emoluments, comma, and performance incentives of the president and members of the board. So, I submit, Mr. President.
I'm sorry, are you referring to
I'm referring
page 74?
page 74,
Yes.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the sixth line, 6th, 7th, and 8th lines.
All right.
And to delete what I had earlier proposed as an amendment, and the per dimes, emoluments, and performance incentives of the president and members of the board.
Okay. So that should be deleted in the amendment that was earlier
That
approved.
is correct, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Same page, line 21, at the end of the line, to delete the phrase accordingly renumbered as. And in its
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
and to add the new phrase deleted and a new. So now that sentence would read, Section 24 section of this act is deleted and a new section is added. I'm sorry, Mr. President. Is added to read as follows, colon. That's the extent of that amendment.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On page 74, everything is a new amendment, and may I ask that the entire page be copied and introduced as a new amendment in the bill. There are no lines. It starts with section 32, transitory provisions, and it ends at the bottom, which reads before the effectivity of this act.
Make sure the Secretariat, Mr. Secretary, you have the accurate committee version which the sponsor is referring to, and therefore section 32 of that committee version is read into the record as amended. That is confirmed by the Secretary. So deemed read into the record. Any objection? Hearing none, the amendment on section 32, transitory provisions is hereby adopted.
Thank you, Mr. President. On page 75, line 3, after the word section 50, everything there should be deleted down to the line 24. So
All right.
the beginning of the deletion will read, a new section entitled Section 31 of the same Act is hereby inserted. Well, that's all deleted down to the last phrase, in the grant of financial assistance under this Act. I submit, Mr. President.
All right, so lines 3
Lines 3 to
24,
except for the words Section 50 at the beginning of line 3.
except for section 50. Any objection here? None.
And then on the continuation, which is now page 75, to include the phrase, the Philippine Deposit Insurance Corporation may be reorganized by its board of directors by adopting, if it so desires, an entirely new staffing pattern or organizational structure to suit the operations of the corporation under this Act, period. No preferential or priority rights shall be given to or enjoyed by any personnel for appointment to any position in the new staffing pattern, nor shall any personnel be considered as having prior or vested rights with respect to retention in the corporation or in any position which may be created in the new staffing pattern, comma, even if he should be the incumbent of a similar position prior to reorganization, period. The reorganization shall be completed within 6 months after the effectivity of this Act, period. Personnel who are not retained are deemed separated from the service, period. I submit, Mr. President.
Any objection here? None. Approved.
And on the same page, which is page 75, after the words on line 25, which reads Section 51, everything is hereby deleted up to the last line of page 76, the next page.
Any objection? Here none. Approved.
And then on page 76, at the top of the page, this new phrase is included, which should read as follows. The board of directors is hereby authorized to provide separation incentives, comma, and all those who shall retire or be separated from the service on account of reorganization under the preceding section shall be entitled to such incentives which may be in addition to all gratuities and benefits to which they may be entitled under existing laws. I submit, Mr. President.
Any objection? Here none. Approved.
And on the same page, page 76, line 23, to delete the numbers 33 and insert the number 31. I submit, Mr. President.
Approved.
On page 77, line 7, to delete the number 34 and insert the number 32. I submit, Mr.
What
President.
line is it?
Line 7.
Should it be line 7 or line 2? On page 77,
Page 77, I have line 7, Mr. President.
on page 77, I have no lines. The line 7 does not pertain to a numerical. Huh?
1 minute.
1 minute suspension. Kaya mo ito sa akin.
Read this. Because look, mahaba pa ito eh. Yeah. What? What do you say? So I can read from this, but does the President have this? Motion to resume, Mr. President.
Session is resumed.
Mr. President, I'm wondering if you now have a new copy of page 77.
Please proceed. Please proceed.
All right,
Senator.
on page 77, line 7, to delete the number 34 and insert the number 32. I submit, Mr.
Any
President.
objection? Hearing none, approved.
And on line 12, to delete the number 35 and insert the number 33. I
Approved.
submit, Mr. President. And that is the extent of the committee amendments. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right.
Mr. President, there being no other committee amendments, I move that we close the period of committee amendments.
Period for committee amendments is terminated.
Move that we open the period of individual amendments.
The period for individual amendments is in order. Senator Osmeña.
There are no reservations to make individual amendments. I move to close the period of individual amendments, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, the period for individual amendments is hereby terminated.
Mr. President, I move that we approve on second reading Senate Bill 2967 under Committee Report 268.
Is it the 2976? Not 26. Is it 2967 or 29? I'm sorry. Huh? Is it 2976?
Well, the agenda says 2967.
The committee report says
Well, for the
29
Secretariat to make the appropriate correction. But we're talking
official-
about the PDIC law, Mr. President.
yes, the
Yeah.
PDIC law, the official record indicate Senate Bill number 2976. There was a typographical error in the agenda prepared, so we approve on
2976
second
then, Mr.
reading.
President.
Senate Bill number 2976 under Committee Report number 268. This is the act amending the charter of the PDIC. So approve on second reading.
I move to suspend consideration of the PDIC bill, Mr. President.
Consideration of the measure is suspended.
Mr. President, with the consent of the Senate, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill 2836 under Committee Report 178. This bill pertains to the proposed retirement age of surface mine workers.
Any objection? Hearing and approved.
Mr. President, the parliamentary status of the measure is that the sponsor delivered the sponsorship speech last June 10, 2015. I move that we open the period of interpellations.
Any objection? Hearing none.
I move
Period for
for
interpellation is hereby terminated. I'm sorry?
to open, Mr.
To
President.
open. Period for interpellation is in order.
Mr. President, I move for recognition as the sponsor.
The acting majority leader is recognized as principal sponsor.
Mr. President, no members have signified their intent to interpellate. I thus move that we close the period of interpellations.
Period for interpellation is terminated.
Mr. President, move that we open the period of committee amendments.
Committee amendments are in order.
There are no committee amendments. I move that we close the period.
So close.
I move that we open the period for individual amendments.
Period for individual amendments is in order.
There are a few, Mr. President, if I may be allowed.
Please proceed.
Mr. President, on page 1, section 1, under line 1, before the word of, to delete the word Article 293 and replace it with the word Article 302. So moved.
Article
Article 293, to delete the word Article 293 and to
And-
replace it with Article 302.
302.
So moved.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On the same page, section 1, line 5, before the word retirement, to delete the word Article 293 and again to replace it with the word Article 302. So
Any
moved.
objection? Hearing none, approved.
On page 3, Mr. President, under section 1, line number 4, after the word shall and before the word include, to insert the word only. Hence, the paragraph would now read, for purposes of this act, surface mine workers shall only include mill plant workers, electrical, mechanical, and tailings pond personnel. So move.
Approved.
On the same page, Mr. President, section 1, line number 13, after the word under and before the word of, to delete the word Article 288 and replace it with the word Article 303. So move.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Also on page 3, Mr. President, under section 2, line number 24, before the word in, to delete the word Article 293 and replace it with the word Article 302.
Approved.
On the same page, page 3, under section 2, line number 25, after the word Republic Act number 10151, but before the period, to insert the phrase and as promulgated by the Department of Labor and Employment in their Department Advisory Order number 01, series of 2015. So move.
Approved.
And a new section to be inserted before section 1 of the bill to be entitled the Declaration of Policy to read as follows. It is hereby declared the policy of the state to enhance the welfare of mine workers, both surface and underground, by appropriately adjusting their retirement age. Period. The state recognizes the vulnerability of miners due to the presence of innumerable harmful elements in their profession, leading to more serious health problems, especially as these individuals age, and how these circumstances are more dangerous compared to the ordinary worker far away from mines. So move.
Approved.
In consideration of the renumbering of the Labor Code, the word Article 293 in the title shall be deleted and replaced with the word Article 302. So move, Mr. President.
Approved.
No other individual amendments, Mr. President. I move that we close the period for individual amendments.
Any objection? Hearing none. Approved.
Mr. President, I move that we approve on second reading Senate Bill 2836 under Committee Report 178. So move.
Any objection? Hearing none. Senate Bill 2386 under Committee Report 178 is hereby approved on second reading.
Mr. President, I move that we suspend consideration of the bill.
So suspended.
Mr. President, with the consent of the Senate, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill 129 under Committee Report number 70. This bill pertains to the proposed Raised Horse Jockeys Retirement Act, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none. Consideration of Senate Bill 129 under Committee Report 70 is in order.
Mr. President, the parliamentary status is that the sponsor delivered sponsorship speech last June 10, 2015. I move that we open the period of interpellations.
Period of interpellation is in order.
Mr. President, there are no members who have signified their intent to interpellate. I thus move that we close the period of interpellation.
So closed.
Mr. President, move that we open the period of committee amendments.
Committee amendments are in order.
If I may be allowed, Mr. President.
Please proceed.
On page 1, line 4, section 2, to amend 287-A to be changed to 291-A.
Any objection? Hearing none. Approved.
Similar corrections to be made. A similar correction to be made on line 5, Mr. President. So move.
Approved.
On the same page again, section 2, line 11, the number 287 to be changed to 291, Mr. President.
Approved.
On the same page, section 2, on the same line 11, after the word code but before the period, to insert the following phrase, provided that he shall pay additional premiums to the SSS as may be prescribed in the implementing rules and regulations of this Act. So move.
Approved.
Finally, Mr. President, on the same page, in the fourth line of the title of the bill, after the word article but before the word reducing, to change the number 287-A to be changed to 291-A.
Approved.
Those are the only committee amendments, Mr. President. I move that we close the period of committee amendments.
All right. What about, that's an amendment to the title of the bill?
Yes, Mr. President.
All right.
We saved that for last time.
Any objection here?
Mr. President, there are no other. I move to open the period of individual amendments.
In order.
Mr. President, 1 minute suspension.
Suspension for 1 minute.
Ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session is resumed.
Mr. President, just one individual amendment to have an omnibus amendment regarding the renumbering of the provisions, Mr. President. I so
And
move.
What is the amendment?
Just an omnibus to correct the renumbering, Mr.
To
President.
renumber.
Yes, subject to
All
statute.
right, yes. The Secretariat is authorized to renumber the provisions to fit the amendments presented on the floor.
So moved, Mr. President.
Approved.
Mr. President, there are no other individual amendments. I move that we close the period of individual amendments.
Period for amendments terminated.
Mr. President, I move that we approve on second reading Senate Bill 129 under Committee Report 70.
Any objection? Hearing none, Senate Bill 129 is hereby approved on second reading.
Mr. President, I move that we suspend consideration of the measure, Senate Bill 129.
So suspended. One minute suspension. Wala namang meeting yan. Ha? Sige. Hindi, at saka clear error naman. In fact, we can make it. Yeah, 2,000. Abot mo na 2,000. Abot pa. Okay, sige. Okay. With the permission of the chamber, session is resumed. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, with the consent of the Senate, I move that we transfer Senate Bill 3024 under Committee Report 325 from the calendar for ordinary business to the calendar for special orders.
Any objection? Hearing none, in order.
With the permission of the body, I move that we consider Senate Bill 3024 under Committee Report 325.
Approved.
With the permission of the body, I move that the Secretary read only the title of the measure.
Secretary will read the title of the measure.
Senate Bill number 3024, an act lowering the age requirement for applicants taking the board examination for social workers, providing for continuing social work education, and upgrading the sundry provisions relative to the practice of social work.
Majority Leader.
I move that we recognize Senator Trillanes to sponsor the measure.
Senator Trillanes is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on Civil Service, Government Organization, and Professional Regulation has the honor to sponsor Senate Bill number 3024, entitled An Act Lowering the Age Requirement for Applicants Taking the Board Examination for Social Workers, providing for continuing social work education, and upgrading the sundry provisions relative to the practice of social work, under Committee Report number 325. Mr. President, Republic Act number 4373 defines social work as a profession primarily focused on organizing social services aimed at facilitating and strengthening social relationships between individuals and their social environment for the benefit of the individual and ultimately the society. Moreover, Republic Act number 9433, or the Magna Carta for Public Social Workers, recognizes the importance of social work in helping the members of our society cope with environmental demands and pressures through social work intervention. 50 years since the enactment of Republic Act number 4373, and with the developments and changes in a rapidly globalizing world, it is necessary that the existing law be updated to make it attuned and responsive to the challenges of the world today. Specifically, when the old law was enacted, we set the age of 21 as the minimum age requirement for someone who wishes to take the board examination for social workers. This, however, has deprived many young graduates who would have otherwise qualified to take the examination and become productive citizens of the country. It is the aim of this bill, Mr. President, to address this concern by lowering the minimum age requirement to 18 years old. This bill also allows an applicant with master's degree or its equivalent in social work to take the licensure examination. Furthermore, the following changes are being introduced in order to enable and equip our social workers to become effective partners of the government in nation building, and in order for them to be at par with their global counterparts. First, the creation of a professional regulatory board for social workers, which shall supervise the practice of social work. Second, we shall now be requiring our social workers to undergo continuing professional development in order to ensure that they are updated on the latest developments and innovations in their profession. Third, the integration of social work profession through mandatory membership in one and only accredited integrated professional organization of social workers. And lastly, the issuance of special temporary permits to foreign social workers subject to the approval of the board. With more than half of the country's social workers engaged as civil servants, social work clearly is a key to fulfilling the government's role in the delivery of social services. In order to elevate the practice of social work in the country into the mainstream, we need to provide a stable and updated framework which will ensure for our country a stream of capable and competitive social work professionals. Mr. President, the great importance and potential for service of social workers to our country and our citizens necessitate the immediate passage of this measure. Thank you, Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I move that we suspend consideration of Senate Bill 3024.
1 minute suspension. Session is resumed.
Mr. President, reiterate my motion to suspend consideration of Senate Bill 3024.
So suspended.
Mr. President, with the consent of the Senate, I move that we transfer Senate Bill 3027 under Committee Report 334 from the calendar for ordinary business to the calendar for special orders. This is the bill on the old age pension of military veterans.
Any objection here? None. In order.
With the permission of the Senate, I move that we consider Senate Bill 3027 under Committee Report 334.
Any objection here? None. In order.
With the permission of the body, I move that the Secretary read only the title of the measure.
The Secretary will do so. Senate Bill 3027.
3027.
Senate Bill 3027, an act to increase the old age pension of military veterans, amending for the purpose Section 10 of Republic Act number 6948.
Majority Leader.
I move that we recognize Senator Trillanes to sponsor the measure.
Senator Trillanes sponsor the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on National Defense and Security has the honor to sponsor Senate Bill number 3027 under Committee Report number 334, entitled An Act to Increase the Old Age Pension of Military Veterans. Mr. President, in 1994, in recognition of the contributions of our military veterans in the maintenance of peace and order in the country, Republic Act number 7696, entitled An Act Amending Certain Sections of Republic Act number 6948, otherwise known as an Act Standardizing and Upgrading the Benefits of Military Veterans and Their Dependents, was enacted to provide comprehensive benefits to war veterans, military retirees, and their surviving spouses and dependents. However, more than 20 years after its enactment, and with the cost of living expenses having considerably increased over time, the old age pension provided under the said law remains unchanged. It is high time that the old age pension of our veterans be updated. Under this bill, a veteran who is at least 65 years old shall be given an old age pension of 8,000 pesos monthly from the current 5,000 pesos they are receiving, in addition to the annual funding allotment for this purpose. And in order to augment the amount needed to fill in the increase mandated in this measure, the Department of National Defense shall take the necessary amount from its savings. Although this amount may not be enough to defray all the living costs of beloved veterans in their old age, the increase is significant and will definitely help them with their daily needs, particularly their medication. Mr. President, passing this measure is the least we can do to honor the sacrifices of our heroes and recognize their unwavering fidelity and their life of service to the country. It is the hope of your committee that this august chamber will immediately and favorably act upon this measure. Thank you, Mr. President.
Majority Leader. Majority Leader.
I'm getting good exercise, Mr. President. I move that we suspend consideration of Senate Bill 3027 under Committee Report 334.
So suspended.
Mr. President, with the consent of the Senate, I move that we transfer Senate Bill 3026 under Committee Report 332 from the calendar for ordinary business to the calendar for special orders.
Any objection here none?
With the permission of the Senate, I move that we consider Senate Bill 3026 under Committee Report 332.
Approved.
With the permission of the body, I move that the Secretary read only the title of the measure.
Secretary will do so.
Senate Bill number 3026, an act regulating the practice of criminology profession in the Philippines and appropriating funds therefore, repealing for the purpose Republic Act 6506, otherwise known as an act creating the Board of Examiners for Criminologists in the Philippines.
I once more move that we recognize Senator Trillanes to sponsor the measure.
Senator Trillanes is recognized to sponsor the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on Civil Service, Government Reorganization, and Professional Regulation has the honor to sponsor Senate Bill number 3026, known as the Philippine Criminology Profession Act of 2015, under Committee Report number 332. Criminology education gained its prominence as a field of study after the martial law era, when the late President Corazon Aquino signed into law Republic Act number 6506, entitled An Act Creating the Board of Examiners for Criminologists in the Philippines in 1987. Today, the Bachelor of Science in Criminology is one of the many degrees in the country with the most number of board examinees each year. Graduates of the said course find employment and build their career in the fields of law enforcement, criminal justice system administration, public safety and safety administration, and correction and jail management. Mr. President, the state recognizes the importance of the criminology profession in nation building and development. This recognition expresses the country's high regard for the maintenance of peace and order, the protection of life, liberty, and property, and the promotion of general welfare of the nation. It is thus our duty to help develop and nurture competent, virtuous, productive, and well-rounded criminologists whose standards of professional practice and brand of service is excellent and globally competitive. Mr. President, it is sad to note, however, that the profession whose values seek to dutifully uphold and enforce the laws of the land has been tainted with issues and controversies. This committee believes that it is high time that we update the existing law governing the criminology profession to better address the issues hounding the profession and also to make it attuned to the recent developments in the field and technological developments in the globalizing world. Thus, this bill seeks to repeal Republic Act 6505 and replace it with this new regulatory law. Specifically, under this measure, consistent with our other professional regulatory laws that we have passed, the following salient features are being introduced. First, the redefinition of scope of practice of criminology, providing for a clearer delineation of functions vis-a-vis its allied professions. Second, the creation of a professional regulatory board which shall supervise the practice of criminology, which includes instituting mechanisms to guarantee the fitness of individuals admitted into the criminology profession. Third, the law shall now mandate the continuing professional development of our criminologists in order to ensure that they are updated on the latest developments and innovations in their profession. Fourth, the inclusion of a foreign reciprocity clause which will pave the way for our criminologists to practice abroad, provided that we also afford the same to the citizens of the receiving country. And lastly, the integration of all professional criminology groups through the mandatory membership of all registered criminologists in the accredited integrated professional organization of criminologists as registered under the SEC. Mr. President, your committee believes that this measure will provide a stable and updated framework which would help ensure for our country a stream of capable and competitive criminology professionals. It's in this light that I urge my colleagues to support the immediate passage of this legislative measure. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Sandro Trillanes. Motion to suspend consideration of the measure is in order.
I move that we suspend, Mr. President, consideration of Senate Bill
So suspended.
3026. I move that we proceed with the reference of business, Mr. President.
The Secretary will proceed with the reference of business.
Messages from the House of Representatives. Letter from the House of Representatives informing the Senate that on 11 November 2015 it adopted House Concurrent Resolution number 14 entitled Concurrent Resolution amending Section 1 in the title of House Bill number 4261 entitled An Act converting the Bacau Elementary School in Barangay Bacau, Municipality of Mandurriao, Iloilo City into an integrated school to be known as Bacau Integrated School and appropriating funds therefore for the purpose of its enrollment, in which it requests the concurrence of the Senate.
Committee on Rules.
Letter from the House of Representatives informing the Senate that on 25 November 2015, it designated Representatives Ungab Gonzales II, Dava, Almario, Kuan, Daya Jr., Singson, Angping, Teves, Bunigundo, Ay Madrona, Kimbo, and Zamora as its conferees to the Bicameral Conference Committee on the disagreeing votes of House number 6132 entitled An Act appropriating funds for the operation of the Government of the Republic of the Philippines from January 1 to December 31, 2016 and for other purposes.
Committee on Rules.
Letter from the House of Representatives informing the Senate that on 25 November 2015, it designated Representative T, Vice Representative Albano III as conferee to the Bicameral Conference Committee on the disagreeing provisions of House number 5587 entitled An Act allowing natural gas power generating plants in the country to use neat diesel as an alternative fuel during periods of existing or imminent shortage of electricity, exempting them from the requirements of paragraph 5.3 of Section 5 of Republic Act number 9367, otherwise known as the Biofuels Act of 2006, and Senate number 2622 entitled An Act amending Republic Act number 9367, otherwise known as the Biofuels Act of 2006.
Committee on Rules.
Letter from the House of Representatives informing the Senate that on 25 November 2015, it designated Representatives Kimbo, Abu, Aliping Jr., Swansing, Ridon, Noel, and De La Cruz as its conferees to the Bicameral Conference Committee on the disagreeing provisions of House number 3675 and Senate number 2015, both entitled An Act removing the conditions for the condonation of all unpaid taxes due from local water districts, amending for the purpose Section 289A of the National Internal Revenue Code as amended.
Committee on Rules.
Letter from the House of Representatives informing the Senate that on 25 November 2015, it designated Representatives Kimbo, Abu, Aliping Jr., Swansing, Redon, Noel, and De La Cruz as its conferees to the Bicameral Conference Committee on the disagreeing provisions of House number 1039 entitled An Act exempting persons with disability from the value-added tax on certain goods and services amending for the purpose Republic Act number 7277 as amended, otherwise known as the Magna Carta for disabled persons and for other purposes, and Senate number 2890 entitled an act expanding the benefits and privileges of persons with disability, amending for this purpose Section 32 of Republic Act number 7277, otherwise known as the Magna Carta for disabled persons with disability as amended, and Section 35B of Republic Act number 8424, otherwise known as the National Internal Revenue Code of 1997 as amended.
Committee on Rules.
Letter from the House of Representatives informing the Senate that on 25 November 2015 it adopted Senate number 510 as an amendment to House number 4148 entitled an act recognizing the annual observance of World Teachers' Day, declaring for the purpose the 5th day of October every year as National Teachers' Day in the Philippines.
Archives.
Letter from the House of Representatives informing the Senate that on 2 December 2015 it ratified the Conference Committee report on the disagreeing provisions of House number 6207 entitled an act providing for the creation and organization of credit surety fund cooperatives to manage and administer credit surety funds to enhance the accessibility of micro, small, and medium entrepreneurs, cooperatives, and non-government organizations to the credit facilities of banks, and Senate number 2009 entitled an act providing for the creation and organization of credit surety fund cooperatives to manage and administer credit surety funds to enhance the accessibility of micro, small, and medium entrepreneurs, cooperatives, and non-government organizations to the credit facility of banks and for other purposes.
Archives.
Bill on first reading, Senate number 3025, an act converting the municipality of Santo Tomas in the province of Batangas into a component city to be known as the City of Santo Tomas by Senator Recto.
Rules.
Committee reports. Committee report number 320 submitted by the Committee on Local Government on House number 3943, introduced by Representative Romualdo Tali, entitled an act declaring August 30 of every year a special non-working holiday in the municipality of Catarman, province of Camiguin, to be known as Catarman Day, thereby amending Republic Act number 9203 entitled an act declaring the 15th day of August of every year special non-working holiday in the municipality of Catarman, province of Camiguin, to be known as Catarman Day, recommending its approval without amendment, sponsored Senator Marcos Jr.
Ordinary business.
Committee report number 321, prepared submitted by the Committee on Economic Affairs and Senate number 3023 with Senator Joseph Victor Ejercito as author thereof, entitled an act amending foreign ownership restrictions in specific laws governing adjustment companies, lending companies, financing companies, and investment houses cited in the foreign investment negative list, except those in the Constitution and for other purposes, recommending approval in substitution of Senate number 2517, sponsor Senator Joseph Victor Ejercito.
Ordinary business.
Committee report number 322 submitted by the Committee on Local Government on House number 605, introduced by Representatives Calixto Rubiano and Primicias Agabas, entitled an act declaring December 2 of every year as a special non-working holiday in Pasay City to be known as the Foundation Day of Pasay City, recommending its approval without amendment, taking into consideration Senate number 2412, sponsored Senator Marcos Jr.
To the ordinary business.
Committee report number 323 submitted by the Committee on Local Government on House number 5860, introduced by Representative Matugas et al., entitled an act declaring May 15 of every year special non-working holiday in the entire province of Surigao del Norte to be known as Adlaw nan, Probinsya nan, Surigao, repealing for the purpose RA number 7553, entitled an act declaring June 19 of every year as a special non-working holiday in the province of Surigao del Norte to be known as Adlaw nan, Surigao del Norte, recommending approval without amendment, Senator Marcos Jr.
Calendar for ordinary business.
Committee report number 324 submitted by the Committee on Local Government on House number 5050, introduced by Representatives Rodriguez O. and Primicias Agabas, entitled an act declaring February 19 of every year as a special non-working holiday in the province of Pampanga and in the city of Angeles to be known as Abad Santos Day, thereby amending Republic Act number 7552 as amended, entitled an act declaring May 7 of every year as a special non-working holiday in the province of Pampanga, recommending approval without amendment, sponsor Senator Marcos Jr.
Ordinary business.
Committee report number 325, prepared and submitted by the Committee on Civil Service, Government Reorganization, and Professional Regulations on Senate number 3024 with Senator Trillanes of the fourth as author thereof, entitled an act lowering the age requirement for applicants taking the board examination for social workers, providing for continuing social work education and upgrading the sundry provisions relative to the practice of social work, recommending approval in substitution of House Number 5549, sponsor Senator Trillanes IV.
Call now for ordinary business.
Committee report number 326 submitted by the Committee on Environment and Natural Resources and Senate number 822 introduced by Senator Trillanes IV entitled Not Prohibiting Importation, Exportation of Stalactites and Stalagmites, amending for this purpose RA 9072, otherwise known as the National Cave Resources Management and Protection Act, recommending its approval with amendments taking into consideration House number 4495, sponsor Senator Escudero.
Call now for ordinary business.
Committee report number 327 submitted by the Committees on Environment and Natural Resources and Finance and Senate number 1508 introduced by Senator Hershey Estrada entitled Act authorizing the Land Management Bureau to conduct a survey of cadastral lots in the entire country and appropriating funds, therefore recommending that it be archived.
To the archives.
Committee report number 328 submitted by the Committees on Environment and Natural Resources, Tourism and Finance and Senate number 1463 introduced by Senator Hershey Estrada entitled Act providing for a national ecotourism policy, establishing a framework for its institutionalization, providing the mechanisms for its appropriate implementations for other purposes, recommending that it be archived.
To the archives.
Committee report number 329 submitted by the Committee on Environment, Natural Resources, Local Government and Finance, Senate number 841 introduced by Senator Hershey Estrada entitled Act to direct the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, the National Mapping and Resource Information Authority, together with National Disaster Coordinating Council, to identify low-lying areas of the Philippine territory vulnerable to rising sea levels as a result of global warming and areas at high risk for national disasters, appropriating funds therefore for further purposes. Senate number 1034 by Senator Defensor Santiago Act mandating the Department of Environment and Natural Resources through the National Mapping and Resource Information Authority to identify the low-lying areas of the Philippine territory vulnerable to rising sea levels as a result of global warming. Senate number 1541 introduced by Senator Hershey Estrada entitled An Act to direct the Department of Environment and Natural Resources through the National Mapping and Resource Information Authority together with National Disaster Coordinating Council to identify low-lying areas of the Philippine territory vulnerable to rising sea levels as a result of global warming and areas at high risk for natural disasters, appropriating funds therefore and for the purpose in Senate number 2504 by Senator Lapid entitled An Act requiring multi-hazard maps and flood hazard maps in every local government unit and for other purposes, recommending that this be archived.
To the archives.
Committee report number 330 submitted by the Committee on Environment and Natural Resources on Senate number 2243 by Senator Mario Lourdes Nancy Espina entitled Act providing for legal framework to govern special use agreements in protected areas, recommending that it be archived.
To the archives.
Report number 331 submitted by the Committee on Environment and Natural Resources in Senate 2242 by Senator Mario Lourdes Nancy Espina entitled An Act expanding the list of prohibited activities in protected areas, increasing the penalty for violations thereof, and amending for this purpose RA 7586, otherwise known as the National Integrated Protected Areas Act of 1992, recommending that it be archived.
To the archives.
Committee report number 332 prepared and submitted jointly by the Committees on Civil Service Government Reorganization and Professional Regulations, Public Order and Dangerous Drugs, and Finance on Senate number 3026 with Senators Trillanes IV, Grace Poligadas, authors thereof, entitled Act regulating the practice of criminology profession of the Philippines and appropriating funds for repealing for the purpose RA 6506, otherwise known as an Act creating the Board of Examiners for Criminologists in the Philippines, recommending its approval and substitution. Senate number 1167, sponsor Senator Trillanes IV.
To the calendar for ordinary business.
Committee report number 333 submitted by the Committee on National Defense Security in the House number 772, introduced by Representative Castello Tal, entitled An Act exempting surviving children of military personnel who are mentally incapacitated from termination of benefits upon reaching the age of 21, amending for the purpose Section 25 of Presidential Decree numbered 1638, otherwise known as the AFP Military Personnel Retirement and Separation Decree of 1979, as amended, recommending approval with amendment sponsored by Trillanes IV.
To the calendar for ordinary business.
Committee report number 34 prepared submitted jointly by the Committees on National Defense, Security and Finance on Senate number 3027 with Senators Trillanes IV and Legarda as authors thereof, entitled An Act to increase the old age pension of military veterans, amending for the purpose Section 10 of Republic Act number 1648, recommending its approval in substitution of Senate number 638, sponsors the Trillanes the fourth.
Calendar for ordinary business. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, with the consent of the Senate, I move that we transfer House Bill 772 under Committee Report 333 from the calendar for ordinary business to the calendar for special orders.
Any objection? Hearing none, in order.
With the permission of the body, I move that we consider House Bill 772 under Committee Report 333.
Any objection? Hearing none, in order.
With the permission of the body, I move that the Secretary read only the title of the measure.
Secretary would read the title of the measure.
House Bill number 772, an act exempting surviving children of military personnel who are mentally incapacitated from termination of benefits upon reaching the age of 21, amending for the purpose Section 25 of Presidential Decree number 1638, otherwise known as the AFP Military Personnel Retirement and Separation Decree of 1979, as amended.
I move that we recognize Senator Trillanes to sponsor the measure.
Senator Trillanes is recognized to sponsor the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on National Defense and Security has the honor to sponsor House Bill number 772 under Committee Report number 333, entitled AFP Derivative Retirement Pension for Children / Survivors Act of 2015. Mr. President, we are all aware of the many sacrifices being made by our government workers in order to serve the public well. For our military personnel, however, these sacrifices mean putting their lives and limbs at risk every single day. This, no doubt, is the reason why many soldiers have met their untimely death or have become permanently incapacitated. In cases like these, it is important for the government to support our fallen and incapacitated heroes and their families as a way of giving back and recognizing their sacrifices for the country. The hazards involved in the performance of their duties should not put the welfare of their families in jeopardy in the event that something unfortunate happens to them. This is particularly more important for families with distinctive needs, such as those with mentally incapacitated children, who must have regular and continuous financial support due to their condition and their incapacity to be employed and or fend for themselves. Mr. President, the state has enacted various measures that seek to provide assistance to the surviving family members of our military personnel. These existing measures, however, do not address the above-mentioned scenario. It is in this light that your Committee on National Defense and Security is pushing for the passage of this measure. This bill seeks to assist surviving mentally incapacitated children of military personnel by exempting them from termination of benefits upon reaching the age of 21. The exemption is being sought because their health condition renders them incapable of being employed and to financially support themselves. This measure has been passed in the House of Representatives, and it is the hope of this committee, Chairman, that this August chamber will favorably act and immediately pass this measure. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Trillanes.
Mr. President, I move that we suspend consideration of House Bill 772 under Committee Report 333.
Before we do that, we invite the sponsor of the measure to look at the wording or the title of the measure, because on first reading, you do not know who is mentally incapacitated, whether it is the military personnel or the children. I think you should insert the phrase mentally incapacitated between surviving and children.
So noted, Mr. President.
Yes,
we
yes.
will submit to the wisdom of the chamber.
Because we do not know by reading the bill who is mentally incapacitated. Is it the military personnel or is it the children? So I would suggest that you place it very clearly, the surviving mentally incapacitated children.
So noted, Mr. President.
Yes, at the appropriate time. Upon motion of the Majority Leader, the consideration of the measure is suspended.
Mr. President, I move that we adjourn session until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Wednesday, December 9, 2015.
Any objection? Hearing none. Session is adjourned until Wednesday, December 9, 2015 at 3 o'clock in the afternoon.